Michael Myers is flesh and blood. But a man couldn't have survived that fire. The more he kills, the more he transcends.
Welcome back to Real Talk. We're here to bring you a new collab video discussing and breaking down Halloween Ends, the final film in the new Green trilogy. I've seen some people call it that over on Twitter. So I'm joined, of course, by the main guy on this channel. I am literally just a co-host. What is going on, Mark? How you doing?
What's up, MJ? Always nice to have you on the channel, and it's, you know what, I really hope that we can get a nice flow going here with individual uploads or just, discussions like this, because I always have fun with this. This is like one of the best things that I've ever done on YouTube, is just have conversations with friends like you on here.
Right. And if you guys caught the past video where where Mark introduced me to the channel, this is going to be more laid back, not like the heavy video essay style editing, almost podcast style. So, be prepared for that. This could be like a 20-minute video, 30-minute video, who knows. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to Halloween Ends. This is probably more controversial than Kills, which I didn't think was possible. So what are your thoughts just off of the general, I guess, response to this?
Well,
film?
In order to really break this down, I think I have to go back through the entire Green trilogy just very briefly, because you and I have discussed this a lot.
Many phone calls about Halloween. Yeah.
So generally, I don't like 2018. I know a lot of people do, although I feel like that movie has a little bit of a Force Awakens vibe to it, where it's kind of a legacy sequel that doesn't do anything besides kind of hit the beats that you know of from the original classic film. And it didn't have an overall direction for what the story was actually going to be, or even should be, within the narrative of that film. It kind of relied on its sequels to build the story that it wanted to tell. And I feel like that's what makes that film such a crowd pleaser for people. But I've always really despised it because it doesn't push anything forward in any meaningful way. It creates way more questions than the movie's bothering to answer. And it just kind of left me hanging in a really interesting way where I kind of hate it. I wasn't excited for Kills. I wasn't excited for Ends, and I just wanted it to be over. I would rather go back to Rob Zombie at that point, which is a controversial opinion. But with that being said, last year Kills came out after a very long hiatus because of COVID and whatnot. And I remember texting you live during my initial watch of it on Peacock last year, and I was just like infuriated. I was like, oh, this is just the worst. It is the worst movie. Oh, I was just like, oh, I hate it. Lo and behold, you went to go see it. You're like, I don't know, man. It's pretty good. I liked it. So I rewatched it, and I was like, wait a minute. Kind of get it now. I understand what they're doing, especially when you can, you take the original film as a bit of a prologue to this trilogy, and then you take 18 and Kills as a singular film, something that's supposed to be watched in tandem as a double feature, but the middle of this trilogy, and then leading into Ends that has to be kind of the epilogue to the story that they were trying to tell here. I started to really appreciate and start loving Kills a lot. Going into Ends had big shoes to fill, and honestly, as we will discuss, I'm pretty much a huge fan of it. I honestly feel like this is the best in the entire series of this Green trilogy, but I'm sure we're going to get to that. What are your thoughts?
I knew it would be controversial, just not to this extent. I loved Kills a lot. In fact, I did a video talking about the power behind Michael Myers, which we'll leave a link down below in the description, where I discuss in depth exactly what Kills was trying to portray with Michael. And I'm happy to say that Ends actually carried that on, so that video is not useless still, despite what some people might say about Ends. But it's very much a hot take to say that you like this movie. Again, recently did a video where I reviewed it. I'll leave that down below in the description. I got torn apart. You and I are probably going to get torn apart on this. So, it's we're definitely in the minority when it comes to this movie. but I don't necessarily care because, again, I loved Kills right off the bat. And again, that was also controversial. You know what's funny about Kills is it did that story element where it takes like one line from 78 and turns it into like a huge plot point. Cobra Kai does that a lot. You know, with the original movies, they take like one line, like Mr. Miyagi could have like scratched his ass the wrong way and they turn it into a whole season. That's technically what they did here. Is that one line in remember when Loomis is talking to the Sheriff Brackett, he's like, I think he's been here before. I think he'll come back. So like Loomis stays at the house waiting for him. And then Halloween Kills is basically just Michael trying to go home. He's trying to get back to his crib, you know? So
it's such a great twist on Halloween 2, because Halloween 2, everyone gathers at the Myers house just to like kind of be like, this guy killed everyone, and he's just going for Laurie at the hospital. And then they flipped it on its head where Laurie's at the hospital, everyone's gathering at the hospital, and Michael's just like, I just want to go home. He doesn't chase anyone. Like if he can help it throughout this entire trilogy, he doesn't chase anyone, which is very reminiscent of what he was in the original film. So yeah, like that's the one thing about the Green trilogy that I am very shocked at, especially after 2018, which I've already said I didn't like. They get Michael Myers, they get the Halloween franchise, and they have done the best they can to show as much love as they can for the entire series within this trilogy.
Right.
I mean, quite frankly, I wasn't willing to accept it with 18. I started understanding it with Kills, but now Ends comes out and I realize they did justice to, Halloween as the first film in 1978, even ignoring everything that kind of came between 78 and 2018 still can live in a sense. They did kind of build that framework where everything that we know about Michael from Halloween 2, Season of the Witch, not that he's really in that movie, Return of Michael Myers, the Thorn trilogy, Rob Zombie, H2O, that type of stuff could still be in the cultural perspective of Haddonfield. This guy's the boogeyman. These are boogeyman stories. This guy who kind of shows up, sister, not sister, died in a car crash, escaped to become a teacher, all this other stuff. Kids telling kids the boogeyman story. That's kind of what this is. 13 films down the line, they finally end it.
You pretend like you moved on, but you're actually just obsessed with death.
I do have my notes here, so we don't want to take up too much of y'all's time. So let's go ahead and get into this. I guess the beginning of this would be the introduction to Corey Cunningham, played by Rowan Campbell. And I love this character a lot. And I think the opening scene is actually probably one of my favorite openings in any Halloween movie. I think it stands up there, probably like in the top 3. Totally unexpected. I thought what they were going to go for was a twist, because you and I had read a couple of rumors here and there. The one thing that I didn't know, though, was that Rowan was going to be a main character in this film. I didn't know his portrayal of Corey was going to be this new character that was basically going to be on the screen for most of the film. So going into the theater, I didn't know that, right? So I thought that the idea was Jeremy was supposed to be the new Michael Myers. I thought that's what they were going for, was he's the babysitter. Because remember, the mom even has that one throwaway line. She's just like, he's wetting the bed and he's hearing voices now. So I was like, oh, that's 78 novelization. Wasn't approved by John Carpenter, but the novel for that film did talk about Michael's childhood where he heard voices, which I guess is where the Thorn trilogy probably took that from later down the line. But I thought that's where they were going for, but no, it was a twist. Corey kicked the door open, homeboy goes flying, and probably one of the most graphic kills on screen, at least towards a little kid, so.
Quite frankly, I feel like they have never been cruel as cruel to children in the Halloween franchise. I mean, they make a very clear point in this movie that Michael Myers doesn't kill kids, right? Like, we haven't seen a kid die that brutally on the screen with this entire franchise, other than, I guess, Season of the Witch, which is pretty freaking brutal.
And this one, like you're saying, it's horrifying. When Marva and I finally came back from the theaters and we got to rewatch it on Peacock, like we rewinded it, since we could do that, and bro, homeboy bounced off the ground, neck snapped. It was horrible, bro. It's on Peacock. If y'all have Peacock, go watch it, man. The opening scene is enough to pull you in, at least in my opinion. What did you think? You thought this was a very good opening scene, or what were your thoughts on it?
An incredibly good opening scene. First and foremost, how did it take them 40 years, literally almost to the year, to have somebody watching John Carpenter's The Thing during an opening segment or sometime during the film? I mean, they could have done that in the Rob Zombie movies, and yet they were still watching the original, not his remake.
Yeah.
It's just like right there. I don't know. That was just like a really nice touch that was so obvious that once you start thinking that they've never done that before. With that being said, very interesting opening. I wasn't expecting this little kid's going to be the Michael Myers equivalent for the 2020s. But at the same time, I wasn't expecting Corey to go on and have pretty much the main role in the entire movie. I still thought at that point that this was going to be Laurie's story because that's what they were selling. Pleasantly surprised in that sense.
Allison is not equipped for this relationship, and I will not let her get hurt. So stay away.
You started this! You brought me in! You invited me!
Well, my next note here is Corey Cunningham, I think.
Right.
That's the biggest here, the biggest thing here, Rowan Campbell's portrayal of Corey. And I will say this, and I said this in my review, phenomenal actor. This dude portrayed 3 different versions of this dude, like the happy-go-lucky, about to go to college in the fall, right? Then he plays the broken down, the town has failed me, person. And then after that, he's basically, the successor / copycat of Michael. And phenomenal. Really good. Really good. I liked him a lot. I thought he was actually a shining star throughout this film. I was captivated every single time I saw him on screen. I think I even told you one time, I like the fact that this dude isn't like this big imposing character. It's just like you can see him unraveling more and more. And I think I even told you, if I ran into that dude, or most people who run into that dude in a dark alley, he stares you down, you're probably gonna back down from him, and I think that's the thing they were going for. They took this kid who it's kind of like the Breaking Bad type of gimmick where you take a high school teacher and turn him into a this crazy drug kingpin. But with Corey, they took this happy-go-lucky kid, he used to mow lawns, definitely a people person, and then just turned him into this monster, and I don't know, dude. I feel like that's probably the one thing people don't understand about this movie. I feel like because this is such a Corey-centric story, that's probably what's turning off people. Like we talked about in the beginning of this video, that's probably why it's so controversial. What are your thoughts on this overall?
Well, Corey's character, at least in my opinion, as you said, the transition and journey that he goes on throughout the entire film is the most captivating thing within the story. I do feel like a lot of people don't like the fact that Michael Myers isn't in this film all that much. In fact, it takes him almost an hour, 40 minutes plus into the movie until he even shows up. And when he finally does, it is such a dick punch for anybody who went in literally wanting to see more Michael Myers, right?
Right.
Which actually the criticism for this movie is incredibly strange. Just on a small little tangent that there was a big backlash for kills. But now there's a backlash in the other way. It was there's not enough Michael Myers. It's where is the good happy medium? I guess it's 2018 where he's the boogeyman who kills a bunch of people, but he's not freaking unstoppable like he was in Kills.
Right.
The guy was just, he mowed down the entire town of Haddonfield. But, Corey's entire character arc in this movie is what really makes it for me. And it's literally because of the story that the Green Trilogy sets up from the very beginning. The idea of trauma, the idea that these characters, not only Laurie and other classic characters like Tommy Doyle, this idea that these characters have come into contact with the boogeyman, or they live adjacent to the town where the boogeyman was created, at least for them. And they're dealing with the trauma of that. Not just a couple of years later, like we saw in Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, but 40 years down the line, and how has this affected people? To the point where 2018 focuses on Laurie and her trauma, and how everyone perceives the way that she ended up, and how that must be affecting Michael. Like, they're so closely connected that even Michael's doctor, Dr. Sartain, wants to see Michael interact with Laurie again, because it will be a bit of a catharsis for both of them. They're both dealing with this trauma.
Right.
Come to Kills and realize that Michael doesn't care about trauma. He doesn't care about legacy characters. He doesn't care about any of this other stuff. He just wants to go home. He's nostalgic. He's not a very complicated character. And that's kind of what happens. But the destruction that he leaves in his wake rocks the town of Haddonfield, who has kind of been looking at Michael over the last 40 years, unless you were directly impacted by him, like the people at the bar and Laurie's friends, everybody in those circles. People were looking at him as a bit of a boogeyman, like a town legend, and coming up with these weird, wacky ideas for him, like, oh, well, he was the brother of the girl who got away, and type of stuff like that we've seen in other films. This film is Michael's interaction with the town of Haddonfield over the course of that one night in 2018 in Kills, the ripple effects of the trauma that leaves in its wake. People committing murders, suicides, more violence in the community, just this general fear, the idea that Laurie, even though Michael wasn't caring about her at all, just like the remnants of those boogeyman tales that people have talked about over and over and over again, Laurie caused this. You're the reason that he got out, because you kept pushing him. Like, that stuff building to a breaking point. Michael never getting caught, literally going and living in a sewer for 4 years. Corey accidentally killing this kid and becoming the hub of all of that anxiety and trauma and everything that everyone felt, pushing him towards this darkness 3 years after the fact. That is the bread and butter of this movie. And Corey's character really delivers in terms of showcasing the innocence and the slow degrade and fall into the monster that Michael was. And quite frankly,
right,
that's the reason this movie needed to exist, because it asks the question, where does the trauma come from? Is it within, or is it literally the environments that we grow up in? Michael might have made a mistake. That's the kind of thing that I look at after watching this movie, and I'm not entirely sure this is what they intended or whatever. Michael might have made a mistake in 1963. He butchered his sister, and that's just ingrained in everyone's memory, the opening of the first Halloween movie. But remember that when we see him take off the mask, he looks dumbfounded. He's not speaking.
Right.
It's Loomis that goes out and says, like, this guy's a monster. I realize he's pure evil and all this other stuff. Loomis has been feeding this to Michael the entire time. He's still his doctor. So, like, it kind of goes to show, like, did Loomis create Michael in a way? And did Haddonfield create Corey? And is this generational trauma always going to build upon itself? And this isn't subtext. It's actually text in the movie. They sit there and they tell you that to your face, and people are not picking that up.
Right. I mean, a good example of that, at least in Corey's case, and we discussed this off air, is the husband. I believe the guy's name is Roger. Lindsay in the movie introduces Laurie to Roger to talk about Corey because of what happened a couple years prior, Corey killing his son. This dude straight up says he tried to forgive him. He goes and speaks with Corey, but he looks into his eyes and then he bounces. And the reason why he says that is because his hair stands up. He was scared. He says that the guy who used to mow his lawn and babysit his kid is not there anymore. Mm-hmm. And then he himself straight up says this, like you said, it's on text and they straight up say it. Is there in the script? Was he always like this, or did the town do this to him? And what you're implying is, did Loomis do this to Michael, or did the town do this to Michael as well. Like it's there, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, dude. I think it probably is like what you said, just because of the fact that Michael isn't in this film for a good portion of the time, that people are just kind of turned off. So they're not interested in the story. You know, I feel like maybe in a couple years down the line, when people start buying the Blu-ray sets or the Apple TV Plus bundles, you know, of these 3 films, and they watch them consecutively, binging them, that's probably when the movie will start getting appreciative. Because this goes back even to 2018. I think I've called it a mashup of Halloween's greatest hits, and I like it. You don't, but and what I mean by that is references constantly, and not like the subtle references like in it's like really in your face. But with 2018, even there, it's discussed in the beginning with the podcasters. Like, they want to know what trauma Laurie has. They bring up her past trauma with her daughter. Like, the question is, do you believe in the boogeyman? I think that's one of the last things he says they say to each other. So all that subtext is there, which I guess is gradual build towards what Kills and Ends becomes. And that's why I can't sit here and take it when someone says that this movie is complete shit. I saw someone on Twitter straight up say this. I don't know if you saw it or if I sent it to you, but and I actually have it in my notes here. I wanted to bring it up. Someone straight up said on Twitter, and I quote, "Because of Kills being so bad, I am pretty much guaranteed that David Gordon Green must have made this movie as a response to the fans, so he just made a shitty ass movie."
People are afraid. That is the true curse of Michael.
Kind of bringing it back around to The Force Awakens, like this idea that they're course correcting. And I feel like that's become a very big popularized idea. Not because Lucasfilm and Disney did feel like they were very much course correcting with The Rise of Skywalker after The Last Jedi. I'm still somewhat agreeing that they did. They should have gone with an original vision. But that's going to be a mainstay, I think, with any planned trilogy for the foreseeable future.
Right.
This isn't the movie that they wanted to tell. That they were directly influenced by the way that people on Twitter were reacting to their movie. And my only response to that is, one, Twitter is not the real world.
Right.
I think in terms of its entire subscriber base, and this is also counting bots, I think Twitter's like 6% of the entire world. In terms of subscribers, not even active users.
Right.
And people look at it like, oh, this is what people are talking about. Media sources talk about, this is what people are talking about. This is what people think. Further from the truth you cannot get. So that's the one thing there. And on the other hand, I have a hard time looking at this movie, especially with what we saw in 2018 in Kills, and looking at this is the movie that they wanted to tell. I think if you look at the extended cut of Kills, there was initially an idea that was like, okay, we wanted to make it all on the same night. Because the extended cut of Kills has Laurie taking the call from Michael and then going out and trying to seek revenge. And you and I talked about like, oh, that would be really interesting if this entire trilogy took place on the exact same night. So Michael gets out and he causes mayhem and everything, and then he's just like dealt with 40 years later. It's not what happened. COVID got in the way. They changed their ideas and changed their mind about the entire story. That's not to say that the things that they heard about 18 and Kills didn't give them some inclination on how to write this movie. But I really do think that this movie fits very cleanly into what they were trying to set up in Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say that they went out of their way to make a shitty ass movie to piss off the fans or get back to them, because it's like, first of all, like you said, just forget that Twitter thing in general. But not just that, the movie itself is just a straight up love letter. very subtle references, and you had to really think about this to do it. Like very subtle stuff, like the Rob Zombie type of reference of what a town can do to a person and what trauma can do to a person, because that's the way he took his Michael. He grew up in a fucked up home, and it led him down a dark path. You know, the curse of Michael Myers, the idea of being infected with evil, like that straight up Thorn. The season of the witch, the radio tower. Like, I think Corey at one point even straight up says it when he's on the rooftop with Allison. He's like, it calls me. It's almost as if it's a beacon. It's like very, very much there. Some of them subtle, some of them straight up told to you. And it's a love letter to a lot of the Halloween films. Like, really. And there's more there too that we've discussed off the air.
If you were going to criticize this movie, and it's not beyond criticism, I feel like it's important for us to, kind of be a little bit more balanced. If I'm going to criticize this movie, the biggest thing I'm going to criticize is Allison's relationship with Corey.
Yeah.
I have a hard time believing her infatuation with him, given everything that we've seen from his character. One, she has been established over the course of the last two films.
Right.
We've seen her relationships, what she's willing to go through, and all this other stuff. We got a 4-year skip. We don't know exactly what she's going through, but at least she's hitting on, or at least a cop is hitting on her. It's fine. But Corey just kind of shows up, and she is infatuated with him. And I have, call it personal bias or anything, I just have a hard time believing the way that she comes on so strongly to him in order to get across that his evolution is butting up against, Allison's feelings for him and Allison's relationship with Laurie and Laurie's relationship with Michael Myers, right? Like, it seems way too convenient.
I think it was shoehorned, in my opinion. I said this in my review. Now, my girlfriend, when we discussed it, kind of talked about it, and she kind of broke it down as that the town both kind of turned their backs on them, or they felt like they failed them, because this chick literally walked out of this whole Michael Myers situation with all of her friends dead,
right?
At least her close friends and her parents. So sorry, Laurie, move out of the way. This chick, really caught the worst of it. And then this dude, the whole town basically calls him a pedophile and a killer and this and that. Like, and this ain't Twitter either. This is people going up to his face and telling him this, So this dude, both of them feel like they lost a lot. So it's just two fucked up kids, two kids who had tragedies happen to them before they're even out of I guess high school. And then there you go.
Well, Corey was 21, right? Let's not get that twisted. He says he's 21 at the beginning.
Oh, he is? I thought he was, okay, my bad. I thought like he had just finished high school and he was going to college in 2019.
No, he says very clearly that he's 21 years old and he's not afraid of things. So.
Okay, he must have just. Yeah, that makes sense, because it didn't look like he came from a rich family. I think he even had a line about saving money for college. So yeah, that may.
Yeah, oh yeah, like his mom is definitely like not mentally well.
Right. Yeah. So that's pretty much there. But I will say, two fucked up people, and they find each other. I still think, however, though, that it's shoehorned, but I do get the idea they're going for. My thing was just more so how quick Allison turned on Laurie in this film. That was. I don't know. I wasn't the biggest fan of that. But like criticisms though, it's just goofy stuff, dude. What I mean by that is like, I didn't really like seeing Corey, out wrestle Michael. I thought that was a little weird, but
that was the worst scene in the entire movie. It is the worst scene in the entire movie. I understand the narrative reason for it. And I kind of understand the reason that Michael would not let him win, because the whole the things that Kills brought up, where when he kills people he gets stronger. He's killing very minimal people right throughout the last couple years. He's just living in there, dragging them in and killing them, right? That's what they kind of set up.
Yeah, he's at his weakest, I guess. So
he's at his weakest because he's not killing enough people That's the supernatural element to Michael Myers. But man, like that scene should have been handled better. I don't know how you do it. And granted, I think they did the best they could because that was the worst.
I actually had told Marva this, my girlfriend, a very easy way to do it in the style that they shot it. So I'm gonna paint a picture for you.
All right.
So
there you go.
You go down into the sewer. They have that shot. It's the circular pipe thing. You have Corey run in there. They get into it. Now they tussle a little bit. Michael throws him to the ground. So you keep that in there. That's fine. Michael just tosses him to the side like a sack of potatoes. Corey gets up and tries to tackle him. And then instead of the whole they fumble around and he actually throws Michael to the ground, you have them fall into the side where you don't see anything. So all you see is the tunnel light and there's nothing there. However, then you just hear a bunch of stabbing sounds, quick succession, boom, 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 right, the flesh and shit, stabbing sounds. And then out of the dark, you see Corey crawling with the mask. Then you zoom in, find Michael in the corner, and then he does the famous sit up. He sits up and then zooms in on it. I think you could have did something like that. So,
Oh, but the thing is, you have to kind of leave it at that, right? You have to allow Michael to still look at Corey like he's kind of a protege. It's
right.
Because he kind of still treats. I guess maybe then you could rewrite it in a sense where Michael's like, oh no, fuck this kid. He's gonna go after him.
That's why I think you are right. There isn't the best way to do a scene like that. So they probably thought they did it their best. I just think personally for me, if I was writing it, if you're going to have Corey walk out of that scenario with the mask and basically the winner of that little tussle there, again, Michael let him and he was at his weakest. But if you want to have Corey walk out with the mask, I think he should walk in with a weapon. I think that's probably the best way because we've seen Michael get shot, stabbed, or beaten with a bat. He goes down, but he quickly gets back up. I think that would have been the perfect way to do it. Or not even the perfect way, just a better way. You really can't do that scene that well. But that's the first thing I said. We walked out of the theaters and I'm like, so you're telling me he fought 20 people in a mob, but he lost to Corey? And then
he's like, but at this time he's pushing 65 years old. So I mean, and he hasn't killed 50 people in one night. This guy. That's the whole point. And I'm just so enamored with this movie. I could talk about it for literally hours. But the point is you go back to something you mentioned in your review. Again, link in the description, guys. Go watch it. It's an interesting discussion. But look. You mentioned in your review the Michael Myers orgasm scene for his first kill in the movie.
Right.
Beautiful. A beautiful fucking scene. Because it so well establishes the reality that has been built up over the last two films. That Michael has... Michael, over the last 40 years, didn't kill anyone. He's been sitting patiently waiting for a chance for another murder spree. Right? and the 18 is good because I don't like it, but it's good because it showcases that he's just incredibly nostalgic for what he did beforehand. He just murders indiscriminately. This person, this person, this person, this person. But then... you go into kills and he just murders so many people. And it's dude, how does this guy have so much energy? He's so old. What's going on? And it is he's more than a man. Every time he kills somebody, he gets stronger. And you go to the orgasm scene and then you go to the orgasm scene and ends. And it's so true. He hasn't been killing a lot of people. It's made to suggest... based off of the homeless guy that Corey does in that Michael's been living there. He's been pulling people in whenever they get too drunk or whatever for whatever reason and killing them just to kind of sustain himself, literally to survive. And then he's at the brink. He can't have enough power to kill Corey because they're kind of on the same level. Corey brings him a host or someone to kind of get his energy back, and he just freaking goes after it. It's like,
yeah,
that is a perfect scene. That's a perfect Michael Myers scene. Like, he's getting his energy back, just killing a guy.
Right. It's literally taking the Laurie statement from Kills and showing it on screen. And I said this in a review. This isn't something you can really get mad at because to some people it might look goofy, but we've never seen his first kill. The famous mechanic that you always bring up in Halloween 78, we did not see him die on screen. We don't know what Michael did. He probably did the same thing when he killed him. Right. And then in Halloween 2018, there was a lot of police officers that were very bloody on the floor there. You know, a couple of them had their necks snapped too. So again, we did not see those deaths on screen. Michael probably did the same thing. We just do not know. He probably even had a bigger orgasm because it was 40 years? So
he probably had a smoke after that. He went and got a beer.
So again, you can't really get mad at it. And I wasn't, mad at it when I first watched it. I was just kind of like, whoa, this is really happening. Okay. And the second rewatch, I was like, okay, cool. So again, there's just some things I find goofy about this movie. But other than that, I think it's a pretty good Halloween film.
It's been 4 years since Michael Myers vanished without a trace.
The final showdown, what did you think of Laurie versus Michael? Were you satisfied with this ending, or?
That's another thing that I have a little bit of an issue with.
Okay.
If you're going to sell and you're going and making this movie after all of the delays and everything, you know that you have to sell the Laurie versus Michael fight, right?
Right.
That's something that's going to get people in their seats, something that you're going to put in trailers. Obviously, they did. It was a nothing burger. And I feel like that's another reason a lot of people hate it, is that's what they were anticipating. That's what they had been promised. And that's something that we didn't ultimately get in a very satisfying way. Like, it was really awesome seeing Laurie fight Michael, have a montage flashback with all the scenes from the very first movie, 2018, and kills just kind of put together. Like, it was that, I told you, like, that reminded me of a Saw movie where they're like, flash cut to all of these memories that you had seen, like, right, just to that one moment where this guy's going to be taken out. But
right,
it's too little too late. The movie has gone on. I understood what you were trying to do with it, but admittedly, I knew, they knew, the audience knew there was something that they had to sell and get right specifically to get people invested in this movie. And they dropped the ball. They failed at it.
Right. I will say this. I'm pretty sure there is going to be either a director's cut or an extended cut. And if there isn't, then there at least is going to be deleted scenes, like when you buy the Blu-ray or whatever, because I already read a report that there's various scenes that are not in this film already. One of them being the kill for the mother on screen. You actually see Corey kill his mom in one of those scenes. I'm pretty sure, going off of the trailers, that the Laurie and Michael fight is longer because remember in the final trailer, there's a scene where it looks like Michael was on the floor behind Laurie. And he does this, the famous sit-up, grabs the mask and puts it back on. And they kind of like blended it so it matches the 78 scene. So I'm pretty sure that fight is a lot longer. Not saying it's going to make it better. Just kind of like putting that out there that this movie is probably going to be a little bit longer once you buy the Blu-ray, at least in my opinion. Because they did that with Kills. I don't think there's a reason why they wouldn't do that there. Plus, I don't think making the Laurie and Michael fight changes too much stuff. It'll just make it longer. But I agree with you. You can tell there was a clear marketing plan there. I mean, if you watch the Halloween Ends trailers, That's pretty much all of Michael's scenes. I'm not.
That's what they knew. They knew. The marketing team knew that's what they had to sell.
Right.
That's what people wanted. And I feel like that's one of the things that's disappointing people is that that's not what Halloween Ends is. It's not literally 90 minutes of Laurie versus Michael Myers. They're just like going back and forth in a Home Alone-esque reality, like
Goku
TV
versus
show,
Vegeta, right? Like it starts off in the daytime, ends at night. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what people want because that's what we got with 2018. And I will reiterate my point here that 2018 sucks. It's a bad movie. No, it really is. I don't care how you feel about it, whether or not it's good or bad, or you can watch it in tandem. If you watch the first and then 2018, and you can consider that an entire, story, fine. I can imagine that being its entire timeline. You don't have to worry about kills or ends. But if you take it as part of the entire story, it is the laziest in the entire bunch. All 4 films that we have to deal with this timeline, because it had nothing to establish other than the characters that you already knew. It's a direct legacy sequel, and it sheds itself of all burden, can do anything that it wants, and as you already said, hyper focuses on nostalgia, doing things that we've already seen in multiple other Halloween films, but just to a more sleeker design. It's not a great film. People don't like kills.
I like it.
And
I'm not agreeing with this. He's the one saying this.
Okay. You can have that opinion. I have my very specific opinion about 2018. But my point is 2018 is allowed to exist in a vacuum.
Right.
Kills and Ends had to establish a story and an ending to the story. It had to build it had to build the narrative that they wanted, because they allowed Halloween 2018 to exist within that vacuum. And I feel like that is the reason why Kills and especially Ends has been so divisive. Because 18 is not a movie. It is literally a placeholder for fan and critic expectation for what the franchise is capable of. When you start having to build a Michael Myers story, it's going to get divisive, because
right,
the guy's it's just a guy in a mask with a knife. Like what is the story? There is no story. Right. It's either freaking thorns and rocks propelling Michael Myers, or depending on the cut of Curse of Michael Myers that you watch, or it's like some white trash upbringing that has something to do with a white horse, or like every other iteration that we've seen from him. You have to take logical leaps, and it can't just be, I want to see a guy in a mask kill people for 90 minutes, because you can't sustain an entire trilogy of story.
You got that in Kills. Well,
you got that in Kills, and people hated Kills.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. I know you say that 2018 might be the laziest, or is the laziest in the trilogy, or in the 4 films counting 78. Fine, you can have that. That's whatever. But the one thing that you can say though is that 2018, right? 2018 has a lot of Laurie, right? And a good portion of Michael, but a lot of Laurie, and it establishes Laurie's family and her characters and the trauma she's been through over the 40 years. Then Kills is a whole lot of Michael, whole lot of Michael killing, right? Establishing evil, the boogeyman, etc., which is a straight up narrative. I mean, again, this is all in your face. I don't know why I had to explain that, but and then Ends is the repercussions of a Laurie and Michael in the town, and what it can do to somebody, and that being Corey. So you get Laurie, you get Michael, and you get Corey. It's very simple, but go ahead.
I'll do you one better. 18 is a bunch of Laurie. Kills is a bunch of Michael. Ends is a bunch of Haddonfield.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, because that's really what it is. Because like Corey doesn't exist without Haddonfield. Corey doesn't exist without Michael Myers or Laurie Strode or anything else that we've seen in this entire franchise.
That's right.
Not just the Green trilogy, but everything. Because it is very much established in 2018 that everything that we know about Halloween as a franchise, and I'm not talking about just the Green trilogy and the first, Halloween movie, but Halloween 2, Season of the Witch, Thorn trilogy, H2O, everything that exists in the public perception of Michael Myers in Haddonfield in the Green trilogy. Right? Oh, like I thought they were brother and sister. No, that's just something that weird people, brought up to like make themselves feel better about like that night, right? So like that stuff exists, right?
Yeah. I actually never got that until you just said that right now. Wow. I get it, because the idea is, he won't come after me. He only came after her because that's his sister. Okay, that makes sense. I never caught that the first time. Okay, that makes sense now. Okay.
Yeah, like everything, the Green trilogy makes it very clear in 18 that everything is, like the boogeyman is just all these like wives' tales about like this one guy who killed his sister in 1963 and then came back a couple of years later to kill 4 people. Like this guy's the boogeyman. And like that people have, for decades, have tried to rationalize it, and that's all the other movies in the franchise. That's the way that the franchise, like this part of the franchise, understands Michael and tries to bring in every aspect of the films that are non-canon anymore.
To add on to what you were talking about with Haddonfield, the boogeyman, and all that, I got an interesting comment of my review where this guy responds to this thread, and he's like, the town needed a new boogeyman. You could even headcanon the reason why Michael was so weak or why he lost his strength is because instead of the town talking about Michael, they talked about the latest babysitter killer. This film is a lot deeper than people give it credit for. So the idea of the town fed into Corey instead of feeding into Michael, which is why he was so weak. That could also be another reason as to why Michael was the way he was. Because I'm pretty sure Laurie even says that too before the Transcendent line. She straight up says that Michael has been feeding off this town. So, again, another reason why it connects to kills, but people don't want to listen to me. It's all good.
I really like that explanation. But again, it goes back to why I don't like 2018. Because 2018 very much establishes a Haddonfield that doesn't give 2 shits about Michael Myers. That only comes up in Kills. Mm-hmm. And that's my point, is like 18 didn't have to be anything. And Kills and Ends had the entire burden of being an entire story.
Right.
Because go back and watch 18 and tell me that the vast majority of characters that we interact with give 2 shits about Michael Myers.
Right. Well, that goes back to 78 though too, because by the time Michael escapes from Smith's Grove, no one really gives a shit about the guy who killed his sister. 16 years ago, 17 years ago. So it's but I'm just saying, my point to that guy's comment is, even though I do agree with it, at the same time though, I still think that other statement that Laurie says takes precedence over it, because you can then say the reason why Michael wasn't so weak in 2018 was because not so much that he was feeding off the town at that necessary point. It was more so that he was already catching a lot of bodies. He caught bodies on the prison bus. He caught people there. He killed the podcaster. So by the time he makes his way into Haddonfield and runs amok, he'd already caught I think more bodies than he did in the original film.
More bodies than he's ever caught.
And then Kills just takes it out of the realm. But I see your point though. I see your point to why that would bring up an issue with 2018, because 2018, even though it does have jabber about the boogeyman and discussion about evil and the trauma of Laurie. It's very much just there in the beginning. And then it's kind of there a little bit with like Karen and Laurie, but not to the extent that it is in Kills. And then that's what you said earlier, where you can definitely see that they were able to play with the story and establish a more grounded story in Kills, which leads us to Ends, you know? So.
Right. And you know, the only thing that really would vindicate all of this and make it better is if Laurie showed up at the bar for Kills in 2018 and they had that whole scene there.
Yeah. I can see that.
That would have made Kills' flow a lot better, and it would have given more credence to the fact that Haddonfield did remember Michael Myers, even if she was just talking with Tommy Doyle and the rest of the gang, right?
Right.
Like there would be the idea that people still remember Michael Myers and people, have reverence for the people who survived that massacre back in 1970. That's the one thing I would honestly think that like you if you were to edit together the first 3 films in this franchise, the 78, 2018, and Kills, it would make a very good film. Like a very long film, but a very good film.
Right. No, I completely get that. I think that's even brought up in the bar scene, right? Doesn't Tommy, when he gets up there, he says something along the lines of like, Michael Myers, the boogeyman. Y'all remember, right? Or were you too young to remember, or too young to give a shit, too drunk to remember, or something, right? Something along those lines.
Exactly.
So it's like, yeah, again, a lot of this stuff that we're saying in this video, bro, it's there in the movies.
That's the one thing. That's the one thing about this entire trilogy is people have this perception of it, and yet it's been very on the nose with what it is the entire time.
Yeah.
The only reason I had any issue with it was because, one, it was trying to throw out very much trying to throw out everything that had any importance on the franchise and starting completely over. But at the same time, they did that very well. And 2, they had this perception of the franchise as it pertained to Michael Myers and his relationship with the town of Haddonfield. And I don't really think that came across in 2018. And that's probably part of the problem. I feel like they thought that they could save that to the second film because the second film was supposed to take place during the same night. So we focus a lot on Laurie and her reaction to 1978, but we don't focus too much on the town of Haddonfield because that's going to be the entire story of the next film that we're going to tell. And the problem is it makes 2018 exist in a bubble where people look at it like, oh yeah, like 1978, 2018, like that's like these 2 films work very well together because it's the story of Michael Myers and Laurie Strode. But this entire trilogy is quite literally about the fact that it's just Michael Myers and it's Haddonfield.
Right.
Laurie Strode is a player, but she's not involved in any one way or the other.
Didn't they have... I forget the story. I think I'm the one who told you too. Wasn't there like they wanted to release them like in close quarters together? It was like they had already had the script done for it. Like it was... Like 2018 was made, and then like they already had the sequel ready to go, supposedly, if I remember correctly.
They wanted to shoot 2018 and Kills together, like concurrently, and then release them a year apart.
Yeah,
and then they decided to just shoot the first one, see how people responded to it, and then shoot the next 2 back to back. And then COVID got in the way, and so they shot them one after another. Like they didn't shoot them back to back. They shot Kills, they put it together, and then they shot Ends and they put it together.
Well, I know like that. I just thought I remember. I think I do actually remember that. I could probably find the tweet if I look for it, but that they had already had the script for Kills done, but they never shot it back to back. It was just... So I don't know how many rewrites there was, but there was a clear indication that 2018 was supposed to flow into Kills, which it does take place in the same night. It's just obviously, like you said, with COVID and everything and all that stuff, you know. So, because I remember when Kills got pushed back, I was very pissed off by that. But I mean, dude, we've been talking for about an hour. Anything else left to say on Halloween Ends?
Would it be controversial to say that like this might be my favorite horror movie of the year? Like, I feel weird saying that because of how many people hate it.
I don't think it's my favorite of the year, but it is top 3. I think Smile is probably my favorite horror movie of the year.
But I've heard. So. Can I just tell you that like people have been talking about like Smile being about trauma, and that's what makes it. That's what makes it interesting. And like, yeah, but so is Ends, and Ends is like far more interesting than like I watched Smile. Smile is a good movie. I'm not saying that's a bad movie. I enjoyed every second of watching that thing. But Ends is much more subtle.
Yeah.
Subtly about trauma and how that not only affects you as an individual, but how a town is affected by trauma and how a town's, like an entire society's collective trauma can lead people down dark paths.
Right.
Like individually. That's interesting. Smile is just like... There was a point... I know that I'm going to cut all this out, but I'm just going to say... There's a point in a point in Smile where you get to the nurse's home or the guy who died on the conference, and she knows her backstory. She knows the backstory of her client, and she knows this guy's backstory. Very clearly, the movie says, you know, this person killed themselves in front of me. This person killed themselves in front of them, like, or died in front of me, and like this person died in front of this person. Like, I was thinking, okay, the doctor is going to figure this out, and then the doctor is going to figure that out. Like, right? Like, there's a clear connection here on trauma. I study trauma and how it affects people, but then the police officer figures it out. Based off of police files, and I was like, what was I don't know. Like, that's where that movie started losing me. Is like, this is so lazy. Because I felt like they had done the legwork to get us to that point.
I'll do you one better. I'll take a quote from Scream, actually. You might like this one, because it is from Scream 4. Smile might have, you know, possession and all that other stuff and demons and whatever, but there's just something scary about a guy with a knife. So I can see why you like Ends more.
I will say, everyone can disagree with me, but the more I think about it, I'm thinking that Halloween Ends might be my favorite horror movie of 2022, which is insane to say because 2022 has been an embarrassment of riches when it comes to horror movie content.
Dude, that's a whole other video in and of itself. Like, we could do a podcast about 2022 and how stacked it's been with horror movies, and there's been some hits and some misses, but there's like a horror movie coming out like every other week, dude.
Halloween Ends, Hellraiser, Men, Nope, Scream 5, like Barbarian, Terrifier 2, the list goes on and on and on.
Don't forget and you and I both have Shudder, so don't forget the amount of like horror movies that get released on Shudder.
See no Evil, The Watcher, Who Invited Them?
Don't
like
forget
it just
X
goes
and Burrow too,
on
Black
and
Phone.
on and on.
Same here, but
all of
that's
them.
a whole other video that
Black
probably
Phone
will
was
take an
probably
hour
also
to be real
one of
with
my
you
favorites,
to do that. But yeah, I mean, this has been our Halloween Ends. I guess, review / discussion. As you guys can tell, we both liked it. Make sure to comment down below your thoughts and make sure to let us know what you think about this film and the entire Green trilogy, or all 4 films, counting 78. Make sure to go check me over on MJTV. Link will be down below in the description. And all right, guys, it's been real.